When we talk about poverty, the first instinct is almost always to ask, how much money do people have? We rely on thresholds and averages because they feel objective and manageable. But poverty is not just an economic condition, it's a human one. That's why we center this presentation on dignity. If we rely on numbers, we risk missing how people actually experience their lives. Instead of asking how poor someone is, we want to ask, what are people actually able to do, to choose, and to become? That shift in perspective motivates everything that follows.
Defining poverty is not neutral. The way we define it determines what we measure, who qualifies for help, and what kinds of solutions seem reasonable. If poverty is defined strictly as insufficient income, then raising wages or distributing cash appears sufficient. But income doesn't automatically translate into freedom. Two people earning the same amount can live very different lives depending on health, caregiving responsibilities, or access to public services. A dignity-based definition pushes us to look beyond resources and towards real opportunities, preventing us from mistaking survival for well-being.
Poverty matters because it shapes nearly every aspect of a person's life. Financial insecurity is closely linked to stress, poor health outcomes, and limited long-term planning. Scarcity forces constant trade-offs between rent and medical care or between education and immediate income. These effects extend beyond individuals to families and communities, limiting mobility and weakening social trust. Poverty is not just a personal hardship, it's a structural constraint on human potential.
This slide introduces income data, and income measures do matter. Researchers like Max Roser, using our world and data, show that in the early 1800s, nearly 80% of the global population lived in extreme poverty. Today, using the extreme poverty measure of about $3 per person per day, adjusted for purchasing power parity, that number is under 10%. Without income thresholds, we wouldn't be able to track that kind of global progress at all. So, income-based measures are valuable, but they don't tell the entire story.
The different poverty measures reflect attempts to balance usefulness and accuracy. Extreme poverty measures help track global progress. Relative poverty measures capture inequality. The official poverty measure offers consistency, but relies on outdated assumptions about expenses and family structure. The supplemental poverty measure improves on this by accounting for real costs and benefits. Still, even the best income measures primarily tell us about resources, not whether people's lives are meaningfully respected. Researchers at Child Trends, including Yiyu Chen, emphasize that no single poverty measure captures everything. Each measure has its strengths and weaknesses. That's why the supplemental poverty measure exists. The SPM includes non-cash benefits like SNAP and housing assistance, subtracts unavoidable expenses like healthcare and childcare, accounts for household composition, and adjusts for housing costs. As a result, the SPM often shows millions more people struggling than the OPM does, making people question which method is truly superior, sparking debates on whether it is healthier to oversell or undersell poverty. To see how different poverty measures work in practice, let's step away from abstractions for a moment and look at a hypothetical case. Meet the Smith family. They're a household of 4, 2 parents and 2 children. One parent works full-time, the other part-time. They live in Georgia, rent their home, and face regular expenses like childcare and healthcare. They have mobile phones and a household television, the kind of things most families in the U.S. now have. Their combined income is about $55,000 a year before taxes. On its face, this looks like a typically normal working family. The question is whether our poverty measures actually capture how secure or insecure their lives really are. Under the official poverty measure, the question is very simple. How much gross pre-tax income do they earn in a year, and does it fall below a fixed threshold based on food costs? The OPM assumes people spend about a third of their income on food, so it takes a thrifty food basket and multiplies it by 3. It doesn't factor in taxes, childcare, medical bills, or differences in local housing costs. When you apply that formula to the Smiths, they're classified as not poor. On paper, the numbers say that they're doing fine. Now, let's look at the same family under the supplemental poverty measure. The SPM asks a different question. What do the Smiths actually have access to after unavoidable expenses? It includes taxes, accounts for non-cash benefits like SNAP and housing assistance, and subtracts costs that families can't realistically avoid: childcare, medical expenses, and regional living costs. When you adjust for all that, the picture changes. Under the SPM, the Smiths are classified as poor, not because their income suddenly dropped, but because their real capacity to meet basic needs is far more constrained than the OPM allows us to see. This shows how much our conclusions depend on the metrics we choose. Respecting dignity doesn't just mean survival. It means having real opportunity and agency. In Allison's memoir, poverty isn't mainly described as hunger or homelessness. Instead, it shows up as constant stress, limited choices, and a lack of control over your future. That highlights something income numbers often miss. You can technically meet your basic needs and still feel trapped. As Allison writes, we were the they everyone talks about, the ungrateful poor. Poverty often involves stigma and loss of voice, where people are spoken about rather than listened to. A dignity-centered approach insists that people in poverty are agents whose choices and perspectives matter.
This distinction between functionings and capabilities helps explain why resources alone are not enough. And this is where Nussbaum's framework helps clarify things. She distinguishes between capabilities and functionings. Capabilities refer to genuine possibilities, what someone could reasonably do. Functionings refer to what actually happens in practice. For example, John has the capability to walk 10 miles to the store, but because he has a broken ankle, he cannot functionally do it. He has capability, but no functioning. Many people in poverty face similar barriers. They may technically have access to work or education, but illness, discrimination, or unstable conditions prevent those capabilities from becoming real.
This graphic brings our argument together. The capabilities approach helps us see poverty in terms of real freedom, what people are actually able to do and be. It emphasizes that every capability matters and that people shouldn't be forced into tragic trade-offs between health, work, and dignity. The supplemental poverty measure, while not philosophical, reflects the same insight Martha Nussbaum emphasizes. Income alone does not equal access. By accounting for family size, cohabitation, unavoidable expenses, and government benefits, SPM better captures people's real living conditions. Together, capabilities and the SPM look beyond income and acknowledge that poverty cannot be reduced to a single number.
Rector argues that poverty is overstated, pointing to higher material living standards and widespread access to consumer goods. This critique usefully reminds us not to rely on exaggerated or outdated images of deprivation. However, it also risks equating consumption with dignity, overlooking autonomy, stability, and opportunity. Material comfort alone does not guarantee a dignified life.
The official poverty measure persists because it is simple and easy to apply. Policymakers value measures that are clear and consistent, but simplicity comes at a cost. Ignoring healthcare expenses, caregiving labor, and regional variation produces an incomplete picture of lived experience. Objectivity in measurement does not automatically equal adequacy in understanding. This distinction also helps respond to a common intuition about poverty, the idea that if someone owns certain amenities, they must be doing okay. Think of an abandoned house with a TV and shelves full of books. The presence of amenities doesn't make it livable. In the same way, a family can earn $55,000 a year, own consumer goods, and still lack basic security. If they have no savings, no buffer for emergencies, and no ability to absorb a medical shock, their capabilities are fragile. If a parent gets sick but can't afford to see a doctor, their bodily health, one of Nussbaum's core capabilities, is directly threatened. Income and possessions can mask deprivation, but they don't guarantee real freedom, stability, or dignity. Having basic needs met is necessary, but it is not sufficient for dignity. So rather than throwing out income measures or inventing an entirely new system, we need to look beyond the numbers, using better tools like the supplemental poverty measure and interpreting them through a capabilities-based understanding of what it means to live a dignified life. So if we really want to define and measure poverty in a way that actually respects human dignity, we have to start dignitying beyond the numbers and pay attention to what people are truly able to do and be.